She was just a little girl standing alone in the freezing snow, her small hands clutching a worn-out teddy bear. Moments earlier, she had watched her father's coffin lowered into the ground. And now her stepmother had turned her back, leaving her with nothing. No family, no home, no one to love her. People saw, but no one stepped forward. No one except him. Caleb Whitaker, a man who had already buried his own wife, saw in that child's eyes the same loneliness that haunted him. In that moment, he made a choice that would change both of their lives forever. This is not just a story of loss. It's a story of second chances, of love found in the unlikeliest places, and of how broken hearts can become whole again. Stay with us, and if you believe in love's power to heal, subscribe now to Hidden Echo Stories. The cemetery was wrapped in a heavy silence, broken only by the crunch of boots against the brittle snow. Caleb Whitaker stood tall but weary, his dark wool coat dusted with flakes that refused to melt. Beside him, his daughter Emma squeezed his hand, her mittened fingers trembling though she said nothing. Before them, the priest's voice droned softly, delivering the final blessing over Daniel Carter's grave. The sky above was a flat shade of gray, the kind that pressed against your chest and made breathing feel like a burden. Caleb inhaled slowly, the chill cutting into his lungs, and once again he felt that familiar emptiness pressing down. He had stood at a graveside before, 5 years ago, when his wife's coffin disappeared into the ground. Back then, he thought the grief would kill him. It had not. Instead, it had left him hollow, a man walking forward with a heart that no longer beat the way it once did. Emma tilted her face toward him, her eyes wide, too knowing for her age. "Are you okay, Daddy?" she asked softly. He forced a faint smile, though it barely reached his eyes. "Yes, honey, just saying goodbye." She leaned against him then, silent, offering comfort without words, and for a brief moment he believed he could hold himself together. But then movement stirred at the edge of the mourners. A sharp voice cut across the still air. Caleb turned. A woman in a tailored tan coat and towering heels shoved a little girl forward into the snow. "I told you to leave. You are not coming back with me," the woman snapped, her tone more venom than sorrow. The girl stumbled, her knees sinking into the frozen ground. A battered duffel bag toppled beside her, and in one small arm she clutched a teddy bear missing one eye. Her coat was too thin, her face pale and chapped, and yet she stood rigid, not crying, not begging. The woman's name came back to him after a second. Karen. He remembered seeing her once with Daniel at a company function years ago. Now she turned sharply, muttering something cruel under her breath before storming toward the parking lot. Several mourners exchanged glances, their eyes full of pity, but none of them moved. They all looked away. Caleb felt his jaw tighten, and something ancient and hot rose inside him. Not just anger, but that piercing, helpless rage he had felt during his wife's final hospital days. He had begged then, pleaded with doctors to do something, anything, but had been met only with silence and pity. He released Emma's hand. "Stay here," he whispered. She blinked, uncertain, but nodded. He stepped forward, the snow soaking through his polished shoes as he approached the girl. He knelt before her, ignoring the stab of cold in his knees. "Sweetheart," he said gently, his voice softer than it had been in years. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him then. Her hazel eyes were rimmed with red, yet dry, as if she had already forgotten how to cry. Her lips parted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "My dad is gone. She says I do not live anywhere now." Caleb's chest constricted. For a heartbeat, everything around him seemed to still. The wind quieted, the voices behind him faded, and all he could see was this small child sitting in the snow, abandoned by the only adult left in her world. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emily." Her words were flat, rehearsed almost, like she had explained this before and no one had cared. Caleb swallowed hard. He heard small footsteps crunching behind him and turned slightly. Emma had followed, her little black boots leaving prints beside his own. Without a word, she unwound her scarf and wrapped it clumsily around Emily's thin neck. The gesture was simple, but it pierced Caleb deeper than any funeral sermon. From across the distance, Corinne's voice rang out again, sharp and cutting. "She is not my problem anymore." She folded her arms, her face twisted with disdain. "Do you hear me? She is not my kid. I am done." Caleb rose slowly, snow slipping from his coat. His eyes locked onto hers, steady and unflinching. "She is now," he said firmly. Corinne scoffed. "Excuse me. You left a child in the snow, at her father's funeral, alone. That ends here." Something in his voice, quiet, cold, unwavering, made Corinne falter. Her lips pressed thin, but she did not argue. With a huff, she turned on her heel and disappeared through the gate. Caleb turned back to Emily. For the first time, her shoulders trembled, though she still held herself upright. He extended his hand, palm up. "Let us get you warm, all right." For a moment she did not move. Then slowly she slipped her small, frozen hand into his. He lifted her gently to her feet, and Emma, without hesitation, reached for Emily's other hand. Together, the three of them walked away from the grave, the snow crunching beneath their steps. Later that afternoon, the warmth of a small cafe enveloped them, the windows fogged from the contrast with the icy air outside. Caleb sat in a corner booth. Emily pressed quietly between him and Emma. A thick wool blanket rested on Emily's shoulders, and in her trembling hands she held a cup of hot cocoa. She had not said much, not even when soup was placed in front of her, untouched, the steam curling into the air. She sat stiff, her knees pulled close, as if at any moment someone might tell her to leave again. Caleb's phone buzzed against the table. 6 missed calls, reminders of a world that demanded his attention, meetings, contracts, business deals waiting for him. But as he looked at Emily, her thin shoulders hunched, her eyes lowered, he turned the phone face down. None of that mattered right now. "So do you have any family nearby?" he asked softly. She shook her head. Her voice when it came was a faint thread. "My mom died in a car accident, my dad last week." She did not say more. The words seemed memorized, like facts in a lesson, drained of all emotion. Emma leaned forward then, sliding her own cup across the table. "You can have mine," she whispered. Emily hesitated, then wrapped her hands around the warm mug, holding it as though it were the last thing keeping her steady. Caleb watched her quietly, something inside him shifting, something he had not felt in years. It was not pity. It was not duty. It was the stirring of responsibility, of belonging, of the realization that his life was no longer just his own. "You do not have to go back there," he said gently. "Not ever again." Emily finally lifted her gaze, her hazel eyes searching his. "Then where would I go?" Emma answered before he could, "With us." And in that small moment, in the quiet of a cafe while snow spiraled outside, a decision was made. A family began to take shape, fragile but real, born not of blood but of choice. That night, the Whitaker loft in River North felt strangely different. It was not just the presence of another small pair of shoes by the door or the duffel bag placed gingerly at the foot of the guest bed. It was the way the air carried a certain stillness, as though the house itself recognized a fragile new soul within its walls. Caleb guided Emily into the guest room, his hand gentle as he gestured toward the neatly made bed. It was not much: white sheets, a dresser, a lamp glowing softly, but compared to the cold silence of the cemetery, it was sanctuary. Emma hovered in the doorway, bouncing with nervous energy as she pointed out the bathroom, the closet, the extra blankets in the hallway. Emily followed her with wide, uncertain eyes, drinking in each detail like she feared it might vanish if she blinked too long. "Let us get you into something warmer," Caleb said quietly, kneeling beside her duffel. He asked permission with his eyes before unzipping the bag. Inside, his breath caught. A handful of worn shirts, 1 pair of jeans, a toothbrush barely intact and tucked carefully in a corner, a small pink USB drive with uneven bubble letters scrawled across the tape. "Daddy's wishes." He lifted it carefully, his chest tightening. "What is this?" he asked. Emily's face grew guarded. Her voice was soft, deliberate. "My dad told me to keep it safe if anything happened to him. He made me promise." She had not watched it, she explained, because she had nowhere to do so. Caleb placed the drive gently on the nightstand, a sense of weight heavier than the object itself pressing down on him. Whatever secrets it held, they would face them together. Hours later, when the house grew quiet and both girls had fallen asleep, Caleb checked the guest room again. Emily was curled beneath the blankets, her teddy bear pressed tightly to her chest, the USB resting beside the lamp. Watching her breathe steadily, her small frame finally at peace, he felt something stir deep inside. It was not just sympathy or even compassion. It was responsibility. The next morning, Chicago awoke under a sky the color of steel. Caleb sipped his coffee at the kitchen window, but his mind was fixed not on his company or the meetings he was missing, but on the little girl now seated at his breakfast table, carefully stirring her cereal with deliberate motions, as if she feared being scolded for spilling. He could not shake the image of that pink USB. His late friend Daniel had known something. His instructions to his daughter had not been random. Caleb's instincts told him it mattered, perhaps more than anything. When the girls were settled, he drove across the city to the address Emily had given him. The duplex sat between a shuttered laundromat and a payday loan office, its paint peeling, its windows smeared with grime. The moment he stepped inside, the stench of rot and smoke clung to his coat. The rooms were stripped bare, faint outlines on the floor marking where furniture once stood. Emily's room was the worst, empty walls, stickers peeling, a mattress-shaped shadow in the carpet. It told the story of a childhood erased in haste. Caleb stood still, imagining her tiny body curled on the cold floor, grieving alone while Karen schemed. His anger simmered into a steady resolve. Back in his car, he inserted the USB into his laptop. 2 folders appeared, along with a single video file. The first folder contained scanned documents, bank records, property deeds, and then a notarized will dated only weeks before Daniel's death. Emily was named the sole heir to her father's estate. Caleb's pulse quickened. Karen's name was absent. The second folder contained evidence of forged withdrawals and suspicious transfers, all signed by Karen. Many were crude imitations of Daniel's signature. And then came the video. The screen flickered to reveal Daniel Carter, frail in a hospital gown, his voice rasping but determined. "If you are watching this, it means I am gone. I should have done this sooner, but I thought I had more time." He coughed, his face pale but his eyes steady. "Karen cannot be trusted. I have seen how she treats Emily when I am not there. She is cold, cruel. She is only here for the money. Please protect my daughter. She is the best thing I ever did." The screen went black. Caleb exhaled shakily. The pieces fit too neatly. Daniel had known his end was near, and he had left a desperate plea to shield his daughter. It was more than evidence. It was a father's dying wish. Caleb wasted no time. He called Grace Monroe, a trusted attorney from his law school days, someone who had earned a reputation for fierce dedication in family law. Within hours, she was sitting across from him in his office, the documents spread across the desk. "This is significant," she said, holding the will to the light. "If this is authenticated, Karen committed fraud, and Emily is at risk." "Then we act," Caleb said firmly. Grace contacted a neighbor listed on the will, Mrs. Leighton, a retired teacher. Her voice over the phone was filled with sorrow and anger. "Emily is a sweet girl, but once Daniel got sick, that stepmother of hers stopped pretending, sold the furniture, left the child alone, called her a burden." That word echoed in Caleb's chest. Burden. He looked at Emily later that night as she sketched quietly at the kitchen island, Emma chatting beside her. A burden? No, she was a child in need of love, and in that moment he realized he was willing to give it. In the days that followed, Caleb rearranged his life with a speed that startled even him. Board meetings were missed, deals postponed. His assistant left bewildered by his sudden unavailability. But when he looked at Emily, fragile but slowly softening under Emma's friendship, he knew his priorities had shifted. Success in skyscrapers meant nothing compared to keeping a promise to a lost little girl. One evening, as he tucked Emma into bed, she asked with the innocence only a child could carry, "Is Emily going to stay with us forever?" Caleb brushed her hair from her face, his heart twisting. "Would you like that?" Emma nodded without hesitation. She does not smile much yet, but I think she could hear. Later, when he passed Emily's room, he saw a crayon drawing tucked beneath her pillow. 3 stick figures holding hands. Labeled in uneven letters, Caleb, Dad. He did not cry, not then, but something cracked open inside him, the first sign of a heart learning to beat again. The courthouse loomed tall and unwelcoming against the slate-gray Chicago sky. Its stone walls seemed colder than the winter air, but Caleb Whitaker walked through its doors with a steady resolve. He had faced boardrooms with billions on the line, but nothing had ever made his palms sweat the way this did. His daughter Emma and little Emily sat together on a wooden bench, their small hands clasped tightly, matching coats wrapped snug around their shoulders. They were too quiet for children, too still, and that silence pressed into Caleb's chest like a weight. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Corinne Gaines sat with practiced poise, her pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, her lips twisted into the faintest smirk. Beside her, Robert Gaines adjusted his cufflinks, radiating arrogance. Caleb sat with Grace Monroe, his attorney, calm but ready. When the judge entered, the murmurs died and the proceedings began. Robert's lawyer launched the first attack. He questioned the will, challenged its legitimacy, and sneered at Caleb's right to even be present. "He is not blood," the lawyer declared. Grace rose sharply, her voice firm. "We submit authenticated digital records of Daniel Carter's will, video testimony, and financial evidence of fraud." The judge nodded, unflinching. "Proceed." And then Emily was called. The small girl, her pigtails uneven, walked timidly to the stand. Her feet did not reach the floor, her cardigan sleeve pushed up awkwardly on one side. The room seemed impossibly large around her, but she lifted her chin, her hazel eyes darting once to Caleb before settling forward. "Do you remember living with Corinne Gaines?" Grace asked gently. "Yes," Emily whispered. "Did she take care of you?" Emily hesitated. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, she shook her head. "No, she locked the door after my dad's funeral. She said I was not her problem anymore." Gasps rippled across the room. Corinne's composure stiffened, her face tightening. Grace continued softly, "Emily, do you understand why we are here today?" The little girl nodded. "You are deciding where I go." "And where do you want to go?" Emily's small hands clenched in her lap. She looked toward Caleb, then Emma, and for the first time her voice grew steadier. "With them, with Caleb and Emma, because he makes pancakes, he helps me read, and he came back. He did not throw me away." The silence that followed was heavy, reverent. Grace let the words settle before she nodded. No further questions. The final evidence came when the USB drive was played for the court. Daniel Carter appeared on screen, frail but clear, his words carrying more weight than any legal argument. He spoke of his fear for his daughter, of Corinne's cruelty, of his plea for protection. When the screen went dark, even the judge seemed shaken. Corinne erupted. She stood abruptly, her voice shrill. "This is fabricated, lies you cannot prove." "Sit down, Mrs. Gaines," the judge ordered firmly. Corinne faltered, her outrage muted by the authority in the room. Caleb was asked to speak. He stood slowly, every step echoing in his ears as he approached the front. His voice, when it came, was low but steady. "I did not plan for this. I did not expect to become anyone's father again. My wife passed away years ago, and I thought my story with family had ended. But then I saw her. A little girl left in the snow, holding a teddy bear as though she was nothing to anyone, and I could not walk away. She is not my blood, but she is my daughter in every way that matters. I choose her. Every single day I choose her." The judge regarded him for a long, silent moment. Then her gavel struck wood. "I rule in favor of Caleb Whitaker. Full permanent guardianship of Emily Carter is granted." The courtroom erupted. Karen screamed, lunging toward the bench, but bailiffs restrained her. Robert Gaines was handcuffed, arrested for fraud and forgery, his smugness replaced with shock. Karen herself was served with charges of abandonment and obstruction. The doors closed behind them, leaving behind a silence that felt like justice itself. Emily ran to Caleb then, throwing her arms around him. "Do I still have to go away?" she whispered. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Not a chance," he said, his voice breaking. "You are already home." The weeks that followed were quieter, though not without change. Caleb's once-ordered life became messy with school drop-offs, late-night homework, and the chaos of two little girls who insisted on turning the living room into a castle of blankets. Emma proudly named it Castle Cinnamon, after her guinea pig, and Emily laughed, an unguarded, real laugh that echoed in the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Caleb noticed how Emily's drawings changed. At first they were houses with empty windows, lonely stick figures standing apart, but slowly color seeped in. Sunflowers appeared, smiling faces. A bench in the yard where three figures sat together. The word home written above in uneven letters. Each picture was a step toward healing. One snowy evening, Caleb found Emily crying in her sleep, trembling, begging not to be taken away. He gathered her into his arms, whispering over and over, "You are safe. No one will take you. You belong here." It was not just comfort, it was a vow. By spring, the guest room no longer looked temporary. Soft coral paint brightened the walls, shelves filled with books and toys appeared, and Emma insisted on stringing lights across both their beds. Caleb watched the transformation quietly, humbled by how a room could shift from emptiness to belonging so quickly. The final test came at Thanksgiving, a year later. The dining table, once littered with contracts and blueprints, now held a patchwork runner sewn by Emma and a centerpiece of sunflowers and pinecones painted by Emily. Friends filled the seats, laughter replaced silence, and the house felt alive in a way it never had before. After dinner, Caleb handed Emily a small silver locket. She opened it carefully, her breath catching. On one side, a photo of her with her birth parents. On the other, a new photo of her, Emma and Caleb together. "Both sides of your heart," Caleb told her, "and both are forever yours." She slipped the locket around her neck and whispered, "Now I have a whole heart." That night, as Caleb stood at the doorway of the girls' room, watching them sleep beneath twinkling lights, he felt the weight of years of grief lift. He had thought his story ended in loss. But standing there, listening to the soft breathing of two little girls who had chosen him as much as he had chosen them, he understood the truth. Some families are written in blood, others are written in love, and sometimes the love you never expected becomes the most permanent of all. There are stories that begin with joy, and there are stories that begin with loss. Emily's story began in the cold, in the silence of grief, with a little girl abandoned on the very day she buried her father. For a moment, the world had decided she was disposable, but love has a way of rewriting endings. Caleb Whittaker was not searching for a new family. He had convinced himself that part of his life was over, buried with the woman he once loved. Yet when he saw Emily standing alone in the snow, he recognized a pain he knew too well, the pain of being left behind. He could have walked away like everyone else that day, but he chose to kneel. He chose to listen. And in that choice, everything changed. What followed was not easy. There were sleepless nights, shadows of fear, and the heavy fight inside the courtroom where truth was tested. But in every challenge, something unbreakable was born. Emily learned that not every goodbye leads to emptiness. Some goodbyes lead to new beginnings. And Caleb discovered that love does not always come the way we expect. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a child who simply needs someone to stay. A year later, laughter filled the home that once echoed with silence. Emily no longer drew houses with empty windows. Her pictures showed sunflowers, warm lights, and three figures always together. She no longer whispered, "Do I have to leave?" because she knew, finally, that she belonged. And Caleb no longer lived as a man holding onto the past. He lived as a father, whole again, healed by the very love he gave. This is what family is. Not perfection, not the absence of pain, but the decision, day after day, to choose each other, to stay when it would be easier to walk away, to believe that even the most fragile hearts can learn to trust again. Emily's story reminds us that every lost soul can be found, and every broken bond can be mended, if only someone has the courage to love. If this story touched you, even for a moment, let it remind you of the power of second chances and the quiet strength of compassion. And if you believe, as we do, that love has the power to transform lives, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe now to Hidden Echo Stories, where each tale carries the echo of hope, resilience, and the promise that no one is ever truly alone.